This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the place to go for all of your website needs. Hop over to www.squarespace.com/Hugh for a free trial, and if you like what you see and want to move forward, receive 10% off your first order by using the discount code Hugh at checkout. Thanks, Squarespace. From where I sit, Sigma's original 24-72.8 DGDN art was already an outstanding lens, but it did have one flaw. Hey everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for Three Blind Men and an Elephant, and I will just cut to the chase. Sigma's just announced $1,200 24-72.8 DGDN Mark II art, 735 grams in Sony E mount, 745 grams in Leica L mount, is a superb lens at a fabulous price compared to its nearest competitors. Yeah, it's basically a slam dunk. The autofocus motor upgrade alone, forget about all the other improvements the company has made to it, more than worth the $100 price increase. It now takes its rightful place among the top tier alongside Sony, Nikon, Leica, and Canon, which in this last case is a shame, really, because Canon full-frame RF shooters have no other choice but to spend just about twice that much to get something as good. Never mind the, we do third-party lenses now too sleight of hand, which really means APS-C coverage only, where Canon isn't paying that much attention anyway. Claudia actually turned to me and wondered aloud how Sigma could build a lens this good for this little, which, fair enough, is far from little, is far from inexpensive for most of us, but compared to its most direct competitors, I'm wondering myself. I'm talking about A, Sony's $2,300 695 gram 24-72.8 G Master II, B, Leica's kissing cousin to Sigma's previous, that is first generation 24-72.8 DGDN art, their $2,900 856 gram Vario Elmert SL 24-72.8, and C, Panasonic's $1,700 935 gram Lumix S Pro 24-72.8. But as I just said, Sigma's original 24-72.8 DGDN art, currently on sale for $1,000 as I'm recording this video in May 2024, was already outstanding. So, first, what's different? I just gave you the punchline, but hold that thought. Second, is it better than the alternatives? I kind of gave you the punchline to that too. And third, if you already have a 24-72.8, is it worth an upgrade and the financial hit you'd likely take on a trade-in? While the Mark II retains the signature attributes of the original, first-tier image quality, build quality, and industrial design, there are a number of improvements. 1. Right. It is marginally smaller and lighter, only $100 more than the original at launch. I've given you the punchline on that too. 2. It offers, call it fractionally better image quality, from shorter minimum focusing distance to better sagittal flare control and minor resolution enhancements, but impressive nonetheless, really, given that the optical design has not changed, save for tweaks to 4 elements in the 19-element 15 group design. 2 elements are now aspherical. 2 other elements, already aspherical, are now thinner. 3. It has a couple of operational improvements too, the addition of a second autofocus lock and the ability to declick the aperture ring. However, 4. The most notable improvement during my time with it on the streets of New York was in its autofocus performance, courtesy of an upgrade to the same kind of linear actuator first appearing in Sigma's 10x 60-600mm f4.5 to 6.3 DGDN-OS sports zoom announced in January of 2023, subsequently finding its way into Sigma's 51.4 and 51.2 DGDN Art primes. The DGDN Art 2 was snappy, and the image quality, as I fully expected, was terrific. But this last point, the autofocus, are relatively minor in my book, but as always, your mileage may vary, and that's just fine. The improved sagittal flare control, for example, will matter most, I suppose, to those among us shooting astrophotography, although an even faster, wider, smaller, lighter, and quite possibly better corrected prime makes more sense to me. The 10% weight reduction and minimal difference in size over the original will matter more to others, although one could argue that those differences are inconsequential, and I would be inclined to agree. Not from an engineering perspective, that's impressive, but from an end-user perspective, although again, it depends. In the L-mount lens ecosystem, the original DGDN art was already 2% lighter than the Leica Vario Elmarit, but far more important was its price, closing in on 1/3 that of the Leica. So, okay, the Mark II is now 13% lighter, and that sounds pretty good. But we're talking about 4 ounces, about the weight of my Phantom X wallet with 7 credit cards in it, which means not a huge deal. All 3 lenses likely to feel quite heavy after a decent stint on the street or while traveling, none of them feeling all that different from one another when shooting from the sidelines over the course of a game. Ditto when compared to the Lumix. Even if the difference is more significant, suddenly this new Sigma is 20% lighter than the Lumix versus the original's 11% weight advantage. But again, all 3 will be dramatically heavier to carry on the street than, say, a split the baby $640 325-gram Sigma I-Series 35mm f2 matched to a high-resolution sensor to make up for most of that reach. All of it, really, for 99% of us 99% of the time. Or, say, pairing Sigma's I-Series 24 f3.5 with the 65 f2, distributing the load between camera and bag over the shoulder, in a pocket, or on a belt, which is a very interesting combo. I know because I sometimes do this, but not great for events, I fully confess. Then again, the I-Series also isn't weather or dust sealed. The pair would cost more than either Sigma Zoom and would, again, especially for event photographers, require more futzing, courtesy of lens changes. Claudia has helped me to soften my stance on primes versus zooms for that reason, and because zoom image quality has just improved so much. As for size, well, at least the way I calculate volume, which is not the water displacement method, but instead applying less than 4 function math to the published width and height numbers. It's the only time in real life I ever get to use pi. The Mark II might actually take up a smidgen more space than the original. Call them, for all intents and purposes, the same size, as is the Leica Vario Elmarit, as one might expect, given that it is based upon the original DGDN art, which makes all 3, in turn, about 15% smaller than the Lumix S Pro. In other words, again, from a user's perspective, changes in size, weight, and price between this Mark II and the original DGDN, not so much to see here. Things do change a bit when we go over to the Sony E-mount lens ecosystem. A. The Mark II Sigma is still 7% heavier than the G Master 2, but that difference is now just about the weight of Sigma's nicely finished plastic lens hood. Not a material difference. B. The difference in size between them is all of, call it 2%, even less of a big thing, as in, it isn't. In either mount, the thing I keep coming back to, the single biggest change, say it with me now, is autofocus performance. Suddenly, the Sigma is truly competitive with the G Master 2 across the board, and better by a good margin than both the Leica Vario Elmarit SL and the first generation DGDN art when it comes to fast-moving subjects. I can't tell you with certainty how the autofocus compares to the Lumix. Actually, I can't really talk about image quality either because I didn't have one in-house. Yet I remember from the launch of it back in 2018 as having pretty snappy autofocus. And when I thought about it and the original DGDN art came out later, I still thought that autofocus on the Lumix was better. I also remember being impressed by the S Pro's build and image quality at launch, but I suspect this second generation Sigma just may outpoint it. In any case, even if that suspicion turns out to be wrong, even with a discount as I'm recording this to $1,700, the Lumix remains 60 or 70% more expensive and closing in on a full half-pound heavier. It's just hard to justify that spend or that weight. I did mean to test the new Sigma against the G Master 2 in New York. As I said, we own a GM2, and it would have been as close to a perfect matchup as was available to us. The Sigma on my 61 megapixel Leica SL3, the G Master 2 on our 61 megapixel A7R5, but Claudia and I got so caught up in our workshop that we forgot all about it. Sorry. But if I recall correctly, I'd still give the nod to the Sony system for autofocus performance because of the cameras. If, that is, you are a high-end sports or wildlife shooter. The A7R5 is second, perhaps, only to the A9 III in this regard. Then again, you'd probably also want the highest burst rate possible in that scenario, and that means moving to an A9 III or A1. I will say, however, that the SL3's hybrid phase detection autofocus, I'm going a little bit far afield, but I think you'll appreciate it, is a major step forward from the SL2's contrast detection only system. And yes, it is so convincing that I finally, fourth time was the charm, sold the SL2. Well, I traded it in at KEH, but I don't shoot sports or wildlife. The SL3 would be the camera within the L-mount alliance for the DGDN Art 2 if you wanted speed and resolution at your beck and call. The S5 II and S5 IIX, the ones to go for if resolution weren't an issue. I might have given the nod to the Sony for sharpness at the margin, but I'm not really sure that that's right. This Sigma is tasty. I would be more likely to give the win to the Sigma for distortion and chromatic aberration control, because even the first generation Sigma I thought was better. What about other competitors? I can't think of another 24-70 2.8 competitor in the L-mount system. The 24-90, a different kettle of fish, much bigger, much more expensive. Within the Sony lens ecosystem, however, there is Tamron's much smaller, lighter, and inexpensive third generation $700, 540 gram, 28-75 2.8. This will be a compelling alternative for some of us. In fact, we bought and used the second gen 28-75 with our Sony A7 IV as our daily driver here in the Batcave for a while. Was that 2 years ago now? It was an excellent and economical choice for 4K video. Then again, although it had better autofocus than the original Sigma, by a good amount, it did not have the build quality nor image quality of that Sigma, far more noticeable to me when shooting stills. And while I might ordinarily be inclined to compare a 2.8 to an f4, in this case I won't, because the f4s in both ecosystems are simply not in the same league optically. There is a wrinkle to that. Sony's $1,100, 488 gram, 20mm to 70mm f4G is about 28% smaller, 34% lighter, more versatile than the Sigma, except when one must have that extra stop of light, and is surprisingly tasty optically, if not quite the match for the Sigma, most notably, once again, when it comes to distortion. Actually, there's a second wrinkle now that I think about it. A second G-Wiz lens. That's what I call these latest G lenses, almost G Masters, save for the name, the color of the G, and image quality at 10/10, that is at the margin. And that is Sony's recently announced, also $1,100, just 440 gram, 24-50 2.8 G. Even smaller and lighter than the 20-70 f4, especially interesting when matched to the A7R5. Or 3 or 4. The point is high-resolution cameras. As with the 20-70, however, I'd still give the nod to the Sigma for image quality and build quality. Both of these OEM Sony lenses are fascinating alternatives nonetheless to the classic 24-70 2.8 configuration, each offering a different set of trade-offs, which some of us will prefer as well. So that's it. What makes the Mark II a real advance over the original DGDN art, fixing the one flaw of the original I spoke of at the outset, is simply no longer an issue. The switch to linear focus motor technology is a big deal and transforms the Mark II into pretty much a slam dunk in either lens mount if you're looking for your first standard 2.8 Holy Trinity zoom. What about upgrading? Would I upgrade, for example, from the original DGDN art if I were satisfied with its autofocus? Actually, no, I wouldn't. But if I weren't satisfied, absolutely. Would I theoretically downgrade from the Lumix S Pro? If size or weight were issues, maybe. If I could trade even. If I had to pony up extra cash to get there, or size and weight were really big issues, I might be more inclined to think differently altogether, as in a pair of small primes, maybe used. If autofocus were the issue, I'd try before I buy the new DGDN Art 2 to see what the difference was. Would I downgrade from a Vario Elmerit? You know what? I would. But I'd make sure to use it with a camera with hybrid phase detection autofocus. What about in the Sony world? Would I upgrade from the first generation Sony G Master were I not satisfied with its image quality? Yes, I would. But if I were okay with it? No, I wouldn't. Would I upgrade from the second generation G Master? No, unless I really needed the money and could make a nice profit on the trade. Would I upgrade from the first or second gen Tamron if I wanted better image quality and or better build? Yes. Third gen? If IQ were the main concern? I'm not sure. Better build? Yes. Would I trade down from the 24-90 Leica? I would. But as I said, there are a couple of fascinating alternatives in the Sony lens ecosystem you really ought to consider. And I don't know that I would upgrade from either one unless you needed the extra stop of light in the case of the 20-70 or wanted the extra reach optically in the case of the 24-50. I really said that about the 24-90 out loud. Anyway, the smaller size and lighter weight of these two lenses are very compelling to me personally. Finally, however, there is this to ponder in the medium term, irrelevant if your decision timing is kind of now. With the continuing incremental improvements in sensor noise performance, mated most especially to something like Adobe's latest lens blur functionality, which is already closer than you might imagine and inexorably on its way to yielding out-of-focus rendering all but impossible to distinguish for 99% of us 99% of the time from hardware-only lens performance, especially given how the vast majority of images are now consumed. That is, viewed on maybe 6 square inches of a smartphone screen. Maybe it's time for lens manufacturers and for us to let go of 2.8 zooms altogether. Embrace the notion of f4s without the optical compromises manufacturers currently insist upon to distinguish between them, and shift the priority to making full-frame Holy Trinity zoom lenses much smaller and lighter, except that smaller maximum aperture, just like Micro Four Thirds. And the same way, actually, so many manufacturers have already shifted some of the heavy lifting, for now, most especially distortion and vignetting, to software. Just saying. This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From custom domains to beautiful websites using their easily customizable templates that you can have up and running in minutes, e-commerce, email and email marketing, SEO, analytics, and scheduling, Squarespace does it all and has done it for us for the last 6 years. If you are a small to mid-sized business in any industry, Squarespace is the place to go for all of your website needs. Hop over to www.squarespace.com/Hugh for a free trial. And if you like what you see and want to move forward, receive 10% off your first order by using the discount code Hugh at checkout. Thanks, Squarespace. If you like what you've seen here today, please give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, join the conversation in the comments section below because this is an exceptional audience. If you'd like help with a portfolio review, gear selection, finding or honing your artistic voice, sign up for a one-on-one mentoring video call via Zoom at 3bmep.com/booking. Finally, please consider supporting our work by using the no-cost-to-you affiliate links down below, sending us coffee money via PayPal, or most especially, joining us on Patreon, links down below as well. However you choose to support us, as always, we thank you for it.